People are dealt bad hands all the time. It's what you do with the hand you're dealt that matters, because that's all you have control over.
Welcome to the Unintentional Podcast. We help you define what it means to be intentional and give you tools to make it happen.
We want you to happen to your life instead of letting life happen to you.
The Unintentional Podcast exists to help you define success and then reach that by growing personally, living intentionally, and ultimately defining your legacy.
Today, we're talking about the concepts in the book Extreme Ownership, how you can't make excuses and blame other people or circumstances for where you're going in life. You have to realize that you are responsible for you, and wherever you're charting your course, you have to realize that you are the one charting your course. So Jocko is a retired Navy SEAL, and he has a lot of leadership experience, and a lot of what he teaches is focused on discipline and on leadership. The part of it that I'm interested in this podcast, in this conversation right now, is the part that's applicable whether or not you have people following you, and that is the part where you take responsibility for yourself. In his first book, there's 3 parts. The first part is winning the war within. It's about leading yourself well, and that's the part of it that I want to focus on today. In communication, a lot of times there'll be a miscommunication, and I can tend to blame my people and be like, you didn't hear me correctly. Even if it's not like a subordinate, if it's just someone I'm talking to in life. It could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be anybody. If there's a failure to communicate, either I can blame them and say they didn't listen to me, or I can say I didn't do a good enough job explaining. I didn't listen and double check to make sure they heard. Or if someone's talking to me and I'm receiving their instructions, and let's say I misunderstand, then I can take responsibility and say I didn't do a good enough job making sure I understood. So either way, I can take responsibility because I can't control them. I can't control my circumstances. I can't control other people. So it's important to realize that if you're going to chart the course of your life, if you're going to be intentional, then you have to realize that you're the one driving. And if you forfeit that by just complaining and telling other people that they're the reason that you are the way that you are, and your circumstances dictate how you are, you've already lost, because you're telling other people that they're driving. You're telling yourself that other people are driving. Now, that's not to say that there aren't bad things that happen to people. There is abuse and people get taken advantage of, and that is legitimate and real. But you're still responsible for how you respond to that. People are dealt bad hands all the time. It's what you do with the hand you're dealt that matters, because that's all you have control over. In his second book, kind of explaining some of the misconceptions of the first book, The Dichotomy of Leadership, he talks about balance and how a lot of people took the title of his first book, Extreme Ownership, and went super extreme, and they were super controlling and just had to micromanage everything. He was talking about delegation and trusting other people and being a good follower even in his first book, but a lot of people took it and went to extremes when you need to realize that there's balance. You need to be able to trust other people. You need to work in good relationship with them and good community with them. And there needs to be trust. Like, you need to be able to delegate and not just control everything. You need to be able to teach your people. Let's say you are over people. You want to be able to teach them to the point where you can work your way out of a job. If the support unit didn't do what we needed it to do, I hadn't given them clear instructions. If one of my machine gunners engaged targets outside his field of fire, then I had not ensured he had understood where his field of fire was. If the enemy surprised us and hit us where we hadn't expected, then I hadn't thought through all the possibilities. No matter what, I could never blame others when a mission went wrong. And that's the big point that I want to drive home, is that you can't blame other people or other circumstances for where you're going in life.
Yeah. I don't know if you kind of already covered it, which was going to be the next thing I was going to ask, was you're not saying to take like responsibility for every single thing that happens in life or anything, but I think the main thing that you're making is that the main point you're making is to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to say, just don't, like you said, you have to take ownership of the direction that you're going. And so even like you said, things can happen in life that are unfortunate, genuinely, and maybe not your fault. And you couldn't have changed that outcome, but it's really important to not say like, oh, well, that happens, and now I've got to be, it doesn't give you an excuse to be a certain way. And so then I guess and maybe you can explain this, but I think that we both agree that there's also a bit of a difference between maybe responsibility and fault. Because I think somebody could do something, even if you did explain really well to them, or, you communicated very well, and they could just be like, completely go against, human decency. And so in a sense, you don't actually believe like, oh man, I could have communicated that better. Or, in that sense, you communicated well, and they just decided to be the worst. And so I guess there's a difference between responsibility and fault. Cause now you're not going to say like, oh, they're being mean to me. And now it doesn't mean that you still have to be in control and say, okay, well, this is happening, and I'm going to take the responsibility to make it better, even if I don't have the fault for what happened.
Because you are focused on the mission. Mm-hmm. If you're on the same team trying to accomplish the same mission, and you communicate to somebody and they screw up and it's their fault, yes, it's their fault, so you don't have to beat yourself up about it. But since you care about the mission, if you want the mission to succeed in the future, look for those things in other people and be able to help them. One way I can do this is, let's say that I have people coming and guest speaking for some students I have. If I set up the time to come speak weeks in advance, and then it comes to the day of and they're late, is that my responsibility? Well, I mean, kind of. I'm running the class. So what I can do is the morning of, I can say, hey, are we still good for this time? Is there anything I can do to help you? That's a relationally smooth, nice way of saying, remember that we have this appointment. Is there anything I can get you? It's not like, remember to show up on time, but it is still saying that. It is a reminder. It's a ding. Just remember, we still have this thing going on. So that's kind of an example of, sure, I'm not going to blame myself if they show up late because I did what I could do. But at the same time, if I care about the class happening well, I'm going to do what I can to make it as successful as possible. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was agreeing with that. And then also, if, just playing that out even longer, if you give them that morning text or that morning, email, and they still are late, is it your fault? It's like, well, no, but is it your responsibility for what, are you going to you're going to have to fill that time. You're going to have to steer the class. And that's, I think kind of the main takeaway for me there is, if you do everything you can and somebody still doesn't show up, somebody still doesn't meet what they're supposed to, it's still your job then to work with that. And so you're not going to be like, well, guys, I mean, they're not here, so whatever. You're just like, all right, maybe you hop on something else or you fill time or whatever. But, totally would depend on the situation. But you're just saying, this is the hand that is coming and the hand that I'm dealt, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And so I think that's the thing, is make sure to, like you were saying, communicate and take responsibility for making sure things go well. But then if they don't and it's not your fault, take responsibility to make the best of that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then I also was just thinking that, and I think that this was something that I would have maybe misunderstood about Jocko when I first heard stuff from him, is I felt like when I hear take responsibility, being the person that I am, I feel like that means take on the guilt or something like that. And I don't think that that's what he means. And so that's been helpful for me to realize that when, and he actually has a TED talk about extreme ownership, talking about this battle that went down and went basically through some sort of miscommunication and terrible things going wrong. They ended up having friendly fire, and like he was saying that he could have put the blame on any number of guys below him because tons of people misunderstood or didn't do their job or something went wrong, and in the end he was able to he just took responsibility for it. And was he actually saying, I did this bad thing and like I'm shameful. No, he was just saying, listen, I was in charge. Like, I'll take the hit. And I think that's a whole different thing. And I think that's more honorable and more sustainable to be like, you're not going to be, he could have just taken, talked to his superiors and been like, listen, okay, this guy did that wrong. He did that wrong. And he knew all the things that had gone wrong, but he just said, listen, I was in charge and we know what happened that went wrong on a macro scale. And so then he just said, it's on me. And I think I just think that's the leadership principle I would like to take from that too, is not to bear the guilt of everything, but to take the responsibility to do the best that you can with it.
I agree. Kind of changing angles on it. We are the people that we are. We're stuck with ourselves. You can never get away from you. You're kind of stuck with you. And so the person that you are, it's up to you. It's up to you, the person that you want to be, the person that you want to become, the people that you surround yourself with, the influences you choose to let influence you. All of that is up to you. And if you're not the type of person that you want to be, who's going to take responsibility for changing that? I want you, listener, to realize that you have a choice. You have a choice about the person that you become. You have a choice about how you respond to situations. You have a choice about what you choose to prioritize. There's a saying that life happened to us, but I don't want life to happen to you. I want you to happen to life. The concept of extreme ownership takes you from the perspective of, okay, all this stuff is happening to me and I am being affected by all this stuff, to what does this situation allow? What are the opportunities that are presented in this situation? Having an opportunity mindset instead of an excuse mindset. The concept of extreme ownership, as I'd like to challenge you to apply it to your life, has to do with taking the cards that are dealt you and playing the best game you can. They're about realizing that you have a say, that if your life is a ship, that you are in control of the steering. That yes, stuff outside your control happens, but what are you going to do as a response? What opportunities do the setbacks bring, and how are you going to take those? If you go through life making excuses and blaming others for everything that goes wrong, you're never going to go anywhere. You're never going to grow. You're never going to take the ownership to become better. And that's what I want to see you guys doing, to become better, to chart your course, to live intentional. Okay, so if this was helpful to you, if you found this topic interesting and you want to look up more, Jocko Willink co-authored a few books, at least two that I know of, Extreme Ownership and The Dichotomy of Leadership, as well as he has a podcast called The Jocko Podcast. And he's also an artist. Like if you go on Spotify, you can look up these little motivational talks. Like one of my favorites is Wake Up and Get After It. If you download that song and set it as your alarm, just listen to it. It's pretty great. So if you liked what we talked about today and you want to look up more, if you're into leadership and discipline, then look up Jocko, maybe subscribe to his podcast. I can see the fly.
I know, isn't it annoying? Thing. Dang it. Oh, my life sucks. I'm just kidding. One fly ruined everything.
You're not taking ownership.
I know. This fly ruined the freaking podcast. It's not my fault. My mom didn't hug me enough as a child, and